Here's a statistic that stopped me cold the first time I read it. Women in perimenopause and menopause are significantly more reactive to psychological stress than they were before the transition began. Now, not because we've become weaker, not because we've lost the ability to cope, but because the hormonal shift, it literally changes how our brain processes in response to stress. Now, let that land for a second. You are not falling apart. I know you hear this often, but you are not falling apart. You are running the same life that you've been running inside that same body that you've had all this time, but now your body's handling stress completely different than it used to. And nobody might be telling you this, right? So today, we're going to fix that. Welcome back to Menopause Stories. I'm Dr. Tamara Beckford, your board-certified physician and hormone specialist. And in this episode, this is one that I've wanted to do for a long time because I hear this question or a version of this question almost like every week. Either you see it, people are asking themselves, they're asking me, they're putting it out on social media. It's like, hey, is cortisol behind all of this? And I've had patients ask, hey, Dr. Beckford, do you think this might be related to cortisol? When we think about the belly weight, the insomnia, the anxiety, the brain fog, the feeling, just being completely exhausted and unable to shut it off, even though you're completely exhausted. Here's my honest answer. Cortisol is not behind all of it, but it is connected to more of it than most of us doctors take the time to explain. And in perimenopause and menopause, the relationship between cortisol and your hormones become one of the most important things to understand about your health. So today we're going to go all in. We're going all the way, baby. Now we're going to talk about what is cortisol and why you actually need it. And what happens when it is chronically elevated, and how does the drop in estrogen make everything worse? And what can you actually do that's going to move the needle? So let's go. All right, first, what is cortisol? Really, what is cortisol? Alrighty, let's go ahead and talk about this. I'm going to get back to the basics because I think cortisol has been getting an unfair reputation, and I want to give it the credit that it deserves before we talk about what happens when it goes sideways. Cortisol is a steroid hormone. Your adrenal glands, and for those of you who have taken Latin, like in high school or ever, I was one of those. So renal, of course, is kidney, and ad is above. So the adrenal glands, it literally sits above your kidneys. It's named for its position, right? But your adrenal glands, it sits right on top of your kidneys and it produces cortisol. And cortisol, I'll tell you guys, it's not a villain. Cortisol is actually very essential for us in life, period. So think of cortisol like the manager of your body's emergency response system, right? When something stressful happens, cortisol shows up. It says, okay, everybody, this I need you to focus on right here. It tells you to zone in, right? It raises your blood sugar so that your muscle has fuel and it sharpens your focus. So it temporarily reduces inflammation, and it also helps you to respond to threats that are going on immediately. Now, once the threat is gone, then the cortisol backs down. Notice I said once the stress is gone. So cortisol has its natural rhythm, right? It's highest in the morning, right when you wake up. And that's so that we can get you out of bed. It gradually declines throughout the day, and at its lowest point, it's at night. And that's so that it can help you to go to sleep. And this is called our cortisol awakening response. So when it's working properly, everything is great, right? The problem, however, is not cortisol itself. The problem is when the system never gets turned off. And here's the thing. Your body cannot tell the difference between you being chased by a saber-toothed tiger and you scrolling an email at 11 p.m. and seeing something stressful. Your body just sees stress, and it cannot distinguish between general physical stress, the genuine physical stress, and the toxic work environment, or a difficult relationship, or financial pressure, or even your 3 kids who need you simultaneously. Let's cue in the Family Guy. Mom, mama, mama, mama. Like, it cannot tell the difference. So all of those, it activates the exact same system. So if the stressors never stop, cortisol never fully drops. And that is where the damage starts. Your body cannot tell the difference between a tiger and a toxic inbox. And guess what? Cortisol does not care. It just stays on. This is where we go through what's going on in the brain, right? So your brain on stress. We're going to talk about the HPA axis. Now, I know you're like, what is Dr. Beckford talking about? Now, let me briefly walk you through the system that controls all of this, and I'm going to break down what the HPA means so that you understand what's going on, and then it'll click, right? So just give me a few seconds to go through this. So it's called the HPA axis, and it stands for the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. I know, sounds like a lot, but like I said, just stay with me for 60 seconds. We're going to break it down. So think of this like a chain of command in your company. Your hypothalamus is the CEO, and it sits in the brain, right? It senses that something stressful is happening, and it sends out its signal. Now, that signal goes to the pituitary gland, which is like the COO. The pituitary receives the message, and it sends down the hormone down the chain, right? So sending down hormones down the chain and signals to the adrenal gland, which is the worker on the ground. And it's saying, hey, stress is going on. So the adrenal gland is, I got you. And it produces cortisol in response. Now, in a healthy system, there's a feedback loop. So when the cortisol level rises enough, the signal goes back to the CEO, say, alrighty, the job's done, and the alarm can be shut off, right? But in chronic stress, that feedback loop is disrupted. The alarm does not turn off. So the chain of command is sending out emergency memos around the clock. On. And over time, the entire system just gets dysregulated. Now, some women will end up with cortisol that's just chronically high. And others, after years of chronic stress, and some of you guys will understand this, they'll end up with cortisol that's paradoxically low because the system essentially burnt out. Both cause symptoms and both matter, right? Both get measurably worse during the menopause transition, which brings me to the piece that I know you really, really want to understand, which is the estrogen-cortisol connection. All right. Estrogen and cortisol have been in a relationship your entire adult life. And like most long-term relationship, when one partner changes, everything shifts. I'm pretty sure we can understand that, right? So estrogen actually helps to modulate your stress response. It does this in a few important key ways. So first, estrogen supports serotonin production, and serotonin is one of our brain's common chemicals. When estrogen is at a healthy level, serotonin does its job, and your brain has a natural buffer against stress. Second, estrogen, it influences how reactive your HPA system is, meaning that when estrogen is adequate, your stress response is appropriate, and it breaks when it needs to, right? Your response to stress goes, and then it can come back down. So what happens when estrogen starts declining in our perimenopausal portion of life? You start to lose those buffers. Your stress response becomes more reactive. So you start to feel more stress more intensely, and recovering from it happens more slowly, right? And you have fewer natural internal tools to regulate it. So it's almost like the COO and the CEO to the COO to the adrenal glands, that whole thing is off. Like nobody is responding. And here is where everything gets even more complicated because cortisol and your sex hormones like estrogen and progesterone, they actually compete for the same resources in your body. When the cortisol demand is consistently high, your body will deprioritize sex hormone production to keep up with the stress response. This is something that's called the cortisol steal. And those science around it, it's still kind of evolving. What we do know clearly is that the HPA axis dysregulation and hormonal changes in menopause create a cycle that feeds itself. So decline in estrogen worsens your stress response. A dysregulated stress response make your hormonal symptoms worse. It's no coincidence that anxiety, sleep disruption, emotional dysregulation spikes during perimenopause. These are not just psychological responses to life's transition, it's really biological, right? So estrogen was literally helping your brain manage stress. When it drops, you suddenly start to feel weak. You don't just lose your buffer, you just never knew that you had a buffer. And so now you're going through this like, why am I feeling this way? Alrighty, now let's talk about high cortisol symptoms. What does that look like in menopause, right? Let's talk about the elevated cortisol. So elevated cortisol actually looks like that list when you look and you're like, I don't recognize myself. So some of the things that you start to notice are sleep disruption, specifically the pattern where you fall asleep, but you wake up around 2 or 3 o'clock with your mind racing, trying to solve some worldly problem that has nothing to do with you, but you just can't fall back asleep. Alrighty, that's called a cortisol spike. And when cortisol rises at night instead of staying low, because remember we talked about it, it's supposed to rise in the morning to get you up out of bed and slowly decline throughout the day to the evening so that you can go to sleep. But when it's rising at 2 o'clock in the morning, because you're in perimenopause, and menopause, you start having that racing thoughts, right? And you're just like, why is this happening? Your cortisol spiking. And then let's talk about that belly fat, particularly that stubborn weight around that midsection. It appears and it just seems like it just came out of nowhere. And it's not responding to your usual efforts. I'm going to diet and exercise because I know when I did this in my 20s, boom, I was able to lose those 5 to 10 pounds. Give me a couple weeks and I got this. Cortisol says, I got this too. And cortisol directly actually starts to promote fat storage in that abdominal area. So you start to deposit fat that's rich in cortisol receptors. It's not you. It's not that you need to starve more. You're down to 1,000 calories a day, 990 calories a day, and not losing. Maybe you should go down to 800 calories. No. It's not you. It's your cortisol response. It's not that your metabolism is failing you. It's just the cortisol is doing what it needs to do under those stress conditions. And might I even add that when you start to reduce your calories more and more, you put your body into an even higher stress response. And so it's like, oh, I'm going to hold on to more of this because the cortisol level gets higher. So understanding what's going on is so important during this phase, right? Now let's talk about this brain fog and memory issue. Chronically elevated cortisol has a neurotoxic effect over time. So particularly in our hippocampus area of our brain, which is a part of the brain responsible for memory and concentration. So when you walk in a room and you forget why you are there, raise your hand if this is you. Your cortisol might be a part of that picture, right? All right, we're moving on to anxiety and irritability. This one often gets dismissed as a mental health issue in isolation. But when your HPA axis is dysregulated and your estrogen is declining, your nervous system is generally running on high alert. So that anxious, on edge feeling that is feeling like it's a psychological effect, yeah, it's correlated to both. And no, you're not going crazy. And yes, your feelings are valid. Okay? Now let's talk about the wired but tired. This is one that confuses most of us because we're like, I'm exhausted, but why can't I relax? Why am I unable to wind down? Why will my brain not just shut off? Like, why is it just constantly going, going, going? Because this is the classic pattern of the HPA axis dysregulation, where your body is depleted, but your alarm system is still just going, going, right? So you might start noticing sugar cravings, blood sugar instability, because cortisol rises the blood sugar levels in regards to the stress response. And when we talked about it earlier, when the saber-toothed tiger is coming at you, we need those muscles to work. So the muscles are running off sugar. So the sugar level goes up, boom, we get to start running, getting to be able to flee ourselves from the immediate danger. But we're no longer running from saber-toothed tiger. And we're literally having stress from the cortisol levels that are elevated, and it's also from day-to-day stressors that are not immediate physical stresses, because the ones that we mentioned earlier, mental stressors like a threat or a thing reading from an email that brings on a stress response, your blood sugar is a part of that stress response. So when that happens repeatedly, your sugars can go and crash and drive intense cravings. And when your blood sugar crashes and you have intense cravings, guess what you're craving? Are you craving that broccoli? Are you craving that really healthy meal? No. You start to crave carbohydrates and sugar. Letting you know this, not saying that you're weak. Your cortisol is just feeding that biological loop, right? So when you're wired but tired, it's not a personality trait. It's just a cortisol pattern. And it's something that I want you to be aware of. All right, the stress weight hormone triangle. I want to take a moment to connect something that I genuinely feel is life-changing when we as women understand it. Weight loss resistance in perimenopause and menopause is not simply something that's about calories, as I mentioned earlier, and it's not simply about exercise. And most importantly, it's absolutely not about your willpower or your discipline. When cortisol is chronically elevated, several things happen that make weight loss feel almost impossible, regardless of your effort. Here are some things. Cortisol, it promotes insulin resistance. When you are in a constant stress state, your cells become less responsive to insulin. What does that mean? It means that glucose, which is sugar, does not efficiently end up being used for energy in your body. And if it's not being used efficiently for energy, the body is going to store it, and it stores it as fat. So cortisol disrupts your hunger hormone, specifically the leptin, which is a hormone that tells your brain, okay, you're full. You're like, okay, thank you so much. I don't want any more. But no, it disrupts that. And then it elevates the ghrelin, which drives hunger. So ghrelin is the, man, I'm so hungry hormone. And it disrupts that. So you're hungrier. Ghrelin is rising. You're feeling less satisfied after you're eating because leptin is just not working. And the more of that happens, you're more likely going to start craving. And like I said, nobody's going to be craving broccoli and a salad. Nope, we're craving high sugar and high fat foods. And this is a physiological change that's happening in your body. It's not a character flaw. So keep in mind that cortisol and stress, these happen with your hormone levels being elevated, and it will hijack your appetite. It's not a character flaw. Please, if you do not catch anything that I said today, please catch that. All right? Here's a piece that breaks my heart a little when I hear my patients who have been, working with their cortisol levels are high, their body is actually breaking down muscle tissues for fuel. The muscle, we know, is the engine for metabolism in your body. So losing it slows everything down. So when you're on this intense caloric restriction, because you're like, the less I eat, more weight I'll lose, you're over-exercising, you're like, okay, I need to do another 30 minutes of HIIT workout. You're actually making your cortisol levels worse. And your body composition can end up being worse at the same time. So please do not hear what I did not say. I did not say to not work out. And I did not say to not try to eat healthy. What I am saying is to understand the physiological changes that are happening in your body, and also to understand how the stress hormone cortisol, in addition to you being in perimenopause or menopause, you're having two big physiological changes working against you when you're trying to achieve said goals, okay? So the answer right now is not to say that you should try harder. It's really to try to address some of these issues that are going on, especially if it's a hormonal issue, right? So I want you to know that you can't out-discipline a cortisol problem. Trying harder in the wrong direction is not strength. It's a setup for ultimately burning out. Now, I've told you all of these things. And you're probably like, Dr. Beckford, well, what is it that I can actually do? No worries. I have you ladies, right? I am going to leave you with some things that can actually help you to move the needle. First, get properly evaluated. And this is a non-negotiable. Get properly evaluated to understand what's going on in its entirety right now in this perimenopausal, menopausal period, right? And one of the first things that you can address is sleep. Please address sleep first and not last. I know it sounds simple. It does. But I want to be direct with you. Sleep deprivation is one of the most potent drivers of cortisol dysregulation. If you are not sleeping, nothing else will work for you. It won't fully work. So we have to get our sleep regulated. Now, that might mean that, you have to treat some underlying hormonal issues. It might mean treating specifically sleep support, or it might mean both. Both, hey, if it is, get it addressed. But sleep is not optional. I sleep when I'm dead. Nope. Sleep is important, and it's a very important portion of your cortisol regulation and also your metabolic regulation. I'll go in deeper on another episode about sleep because I'm telling y'all, it's super important, right? Okay, second, move your body in a way that supports your cortisol and not spike it. So high intensity exercise every single day when your cortisol is dysregulated, it's like, all right, I'm gonna just throw some gasoline on that fire and hope that the fire goes out. No. Alrighty, so like I said, I'm not saying to not do high intensity, but you just have to be intentional in how you're doing it. Strength training 3 to 4 times per week combined with walking and intentional rest is far more effective during this season of our life than every single day doing a HIIT workout. Your body responds to strength work to rebuild muscles, because we talked about it. The muscle starts going down, right, as we get a little older. And it also helps, doing the strength training will help to protect our metabolism. And most importantly, you need time to recover so that your cortisol levels can come down. You need time to recover. It's not healthy to just keep going. You need time to recover so your cortisol levels can come down, okay? Third, you need to eat to support blood sugar stability. protein and fat in every meal. Try not to skip breakfast. I'm saying this to you as I say it to me. You know, I at times would have to do a protein shake in the morning because I naturally am not a big breakfast person. But I'll do the protein shake because I need to get something in my system. So also do not let yourself go to extremely long periods without eating when you're in a cortisol dysregulation state, because your blood sugar is going to crash and that's going to trigger cortisol, right? So you need to be able to keep things stable. Number 4, your nervous system, you need to take it seriously. Take nervous system regulation as seriously as medicine. I'm talking about doing things that can really bring that cortisol levels down. Like prayer for some, right? Something that zones you into a state of calmness, right? For some, it's breath work. For some, it's prayer. It's meditation, quiet time, a walk out in nature, or even putting boundaries on your phone, adding boundaries to your schedule. I know that all of this sounds like, shishi foo-foo, No, you need this. These are not just soft suggestions. They are clinically meaningful interventions that's needed for your hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis regulation, the HPA axis. Your nervous system learns safety through repetition. So you have to practice ways to bring down that stress level, to add calmness to your day, to your life. A breathing exercise, box breathing, prayer, meditation, something that just brings down that stress, that immediate stress that you're feeling. It's important to add that. Even 5 minutes does wonders for your body. Okay? All right, cool. Number 5, consider whether you need comprehensive hormone support. For many women in perimenopause and menopause, restoring estrogen and progesterone to appropriate levels is one of the most powerful tools we have for improving your stress response. And we're not just treating hot flashes here. We are really restoring a biological environment that's going to support your brain, your sleep, your mood, your metabolism, and ultimately your cortisol regulation, right? So as we just talked about, what are some of the 5 things? I'm going to name them again. Get properly evaluated and protect your sleep above all else. That's number 1. Number 2, move with intention, strength training, walking, genuine rest. Number 3, eat for your blood sugar stability, protein, fat with every meal. Number 4, practice nervous system regulation as medicine daily, not occasionally. Number 5, evaluate and get a comprehensive hormone support that can help you to feel better. And you can do that by contacting your primary care doctor, your hormone specialist, your OBGYN, someone who's there to support you through these perimenopause or menopausal phase, right? So I want to close with something that I need you to hold on to. Ladies, you're not falling apart. I know you hear this often, but it's so important that you know this. You're not too sensitive. No. And most importantly, you're not imagining things. You are not weak. What you are is a woman in a major biological transition who is handed incompetent and incomplete information about what's happening in your own body. And this is not your fault. But no, now you know more. And knowing more means that you can start asking better questions and making different decisions. So cortisol is a part of your story. It is not the whole story, and it's absolutely adjustable when someone takes the time to look at this full picture, which is you. So if you're listening to this and you recognize yourself in what I described today, I want you to take one step, just one. Come and have a conversation. I do offer complimentary consultations at Truly Balanced Wellness Care, but I believe you deserve to understand what's going on in your whole health before you commit to anything. So it's a conversation, and if you're ready to make that conversation or to have that with me, you can go to www.trulybalancedwc.com. Looking forward to hearing from you. You can find this information in the show notes. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. If this episode resonated with you, share it. Text it to a friend who has been complaining about the belly weight, the bad sleep. Post it in your stories. Leave a review if you have not, because genuinely, this absolutely helps the podcast to reach the women who need it most. I'll see you guys next week, Monday, right here. Until then, take care of your body. It is working incredibly hard for you. Believe that. Bye-bye.